We are back in the room. So, I've been in sales now for the last 6 years, and I've literally just worked it out across different products, services, and industries that I've sold in across the last 6 years. And I've closed close to 28 million in sales. Now, obviously that's across different industries, corporate sales, remote sales, B2C, B2B, high ticket, low ticket, and everything else in between. But this is the honest truth that nobody tells you when you're getting into sales. And to be honest with you, if I knew this when I first got into sales, when I was 18 years old, getting into that corporate sales job, I would have, one, made a lot more money, and two, done it in a much quicker time frame. So if you're in sales, this is going to be massively beneficial for you, make you a lot of money and save you a lot of time, more importantly. So just for a bit of context before I get into it, just so you know, it's actually reputable. It's coming from someone that's actually done something. You get a lot of people online that just say these things. So backstory myself, I was in corporate sales for 2.5 years, selling for the UK's leading commercial office fit-out company up in London. So effectively, I started out as an SDR. So cold calling, prospecting, outbound dialing, 250 to 300 dials per day. It was very much a boiler room type sort of setup. Like, you couldn't sit down if you did 200 or 250 dials. It was very, very cutthroat. It's funny looking back now, like you hear this work-life balance and this culture and, like all this mindset stuff in work environments, and it couldn't have been the opposite, which is good. It's how I wanted it to be. It was very like, do your dials, you can't sit down until you do your dials. People listening into all of your calls, very, very hands-on, which was good because it made me very, very good in a quick amount of time. But when you're in that industry that I was in, it's effectively, you need to figure out when people are moving offices. Now, the only people that know who are moving offices within the company is the C-suite team, CEO, COO, CFO, and sometimes the chairman. So I was 18 years old, having to cold call these types of people in businesses. Now, if you know anything about business, these are probably the most difficult and most senior people in any business, bearing in mind the head count was typically 50 to 500 people of these companies I was calling. So normally also calling them on their personal mobile. So you can guess how that sort of went down, and I've got a few other stories in terms of maybe for another video, how I managed to get their personal mobile numbers and that sort of stuff. But maybe we won't share that on this video. But I did that, and within 6 weeks, I effectively was promoted to a strike caller. It was the quickest it was done within company history. I won't get into sort of all the story and whatnot, I'll just do the snippets. Quickest in company history, and I was basically a closer. So an account exec if you're in software sales, senior recruitment consultant if you're in recruitment. I was now closing. I was opening and closing full sales cycle. So I was doing the cold calling, then I was meeting them, then I was pitching them, then I was dealing with decision makers, all that sort of stuff. Sales cycle, 3, 6, 12, 18 months long. Deal sizes, 1 million upwards to 10 million. And I did that for 2.5 years and sold tens of millions within corporate sales. And it was from the ages 18 to 20 years old. I then transitioned into remote sales, where I was selling for some of the largest coaching businesses across all the industry. And I was the top performing sales rep on each of these sales teams. So I was cash collecting 150 to 250,000 month after month for these coaching businesses, taking 10 to 15%. So effectively making 20 to 30,000 a month in commissions whilst selling 100% remotely. And the key thing was I was selling warm inbound calls that were booked into my calendar. I was just closing. There was no cold calling, prospecting, or anything like that. So I've done two sides of the spectrum, both for actually, funny enough, the exact same amount of time. Now, the truth that nobody is ever going to tell you, and unfortunately it took me a long time to figure it out, and I'll explain how it did really, because I remember I was doing 200 hours per month in my corporate sales job, 200 hours a month, busting my fucking arse. I was literally, from 18 to 20 years old, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, even Fridays, I'd stay till 7:30 p.m. in that office. People would be going out, London, drinks. I'd be like, no, I'm determined to make this work. I thought I was fucking Jordan Belfort, Grant Cardone. I was listening to it all the time. I was like, this is going to work. And I was just putting all the graft in. And I remember so many times where I'd find out what other people were making within the company, and I was so much better than them. But I was scratching my head, like, why is he making more than me? I didn't really get it. And then I started to understand the game a little bit. And, I remember they was talking about pay rises to me, and they were like, we're going to give you an extra 10, 15,000 pounds pay rise. And I went, wow, that sounds amazing at 18, 19 years old. But then I realized, well, hang on, after tax, that's only an extra 600 pounds per month. And I remember looking at the top performer who'd been in the company. I mean, he was just beating me. Bearing in mind, he'd been in the company for 8 years, longer than me. But anyway, I was sort of joint neck and neck with him. Bearing in mind, he'd been in for 8 years, so he had many more clients than me, but still he was neck and neck with me. But anyway, long and short of it was, he was around 30 years old. And I remember hearing he was making 250,000 pre-tax. So that's like around 11, 12,500 pounds per month. But he also had like obviously a partner. He had 2 kids. He had her car payments, his car payments. He had he basically was keeping 4K a month. And I was like, this guy's working so hard. And he was a very, very good sales rep. Like, even to this day, having worked with, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sales reps now and seen many different people in so many different industries, like, he's still genuinely one of the best that I've worked with. And being around him and seeing how he operated in terms of follow-up, pipeline management, like really treating it like your own business is, a big reason why in remote sales I did so well, because a lot of people in remote sales, they are very one-dimensional. All they know is remote sales, closing, closing, closing. But in my opinion, you're only good at sales if you've done corporate and remote sales, because you have the context of both to just be a fucking dog and an animal, because you're sort of combining the skill set that you get in the best possible opportunity, which combines the two. And I suppose getting to my point, I realized pretty quickly that the game I was playing was almost against me. And I was working really, really hard and I was busting my ass. But for some reason, sometimes leads didn't go to me. They got given to someone else because they've been in the company longer and all of this sort of stuff. And I remember basically figuring out that it actually didn't have anything to do with my skill set, but instead how long I was in the company, or what position I was in, or my relationship with the manager or the owners. And I was just like, this is not the game I signed up for. I played football at a very high level from the ages, 5 years old to 17, 18? And I was always praised based on my performance. If I was a top goal scorer, I was praised, and I was, everyone was sort of happy. If I wasn't, then it was clear I wasn't praised, and I enjoyed that. You only get celebrated for your performance. And yeah, they labelled it as that when I first got into the corporate sales job, but it wasn't. Tech sales, software sales, recruitment, insurance, brokering, business, it's all the same. They say it's paid for performance, but why do you have a salary then? Right? Why have I got capped commissions? Why do the sales cycles take so long? And another thing was the deals that I had, so many people were involved in it. So I could be fucking doing $200 a day and speaking to this person and covering the angle, and then out of nowhere the CFO goes, oh no, we're going to use my uncle's cousin because he's a preferred supplier. And all of the work I've done on the front end is a complete waste of time. So the really core reason, and I think thing that people don't want you to know, is it actually doesn't really matter about your skill set. Of course it's important, but rather the market that you're applying that skill set into. And to give you a great example of this, obviously I'm a great example of it. Like, when I made the pivot into remote sales, I got into remote sales back in April 2022. I left my corporate sales job around March 2022. Within my first month in remote sales, and again, this is not normal. I don't want to come on here and be like, oh, you can make 20K a month and 30K like that. No, that's not what's going to happen. I did have a few reasons why I was able to do that. My existing skill set, the hours I worked, the opportunity I was on, my mentor who placed me onto the remote sales role. A lot of things were in my favor, I will say that. But at the same time, I had a very good core skill set through being in corporate sales already. In my first month in remote sales, I cleared $21,878 in commissions. $21,878 in commissions selling 100% remotely. In my corporate sales role, I made 5K per month. How on earth can you do that in a month? Do you become a wizard? Do you master sales? Do you know every sales tactic in the book? No, the common denominator, I switched industries. That was it. And I just applied the skills that I already have into a better industry. And I think for so long, I beaten myself up thinking, this is bullshit. Why are these people making this money? Why? Is it a skill set issue? Should I get another corporate sales job? Should I get into tech sales, recruitment? But then I realized, no, it may solve a bit of a small problem. Maybe I get a bit of a pay rise, or I can work from home a little bit in recruitment or tech, but it's not solving the bigger problem where I'm never going to make that money in these because I'm capped. But when you pivot into an industry where you're paid for performance, you are self-employed, you eat what you kill, the sky's your limit. And not only that, because I know in door-to-door sales and other sort of sales roles, you are paid for performance, but those are cold leads. This was the best of both worlds. I was paid for performance and they were warm and inbound. So rather than dealing with all of this bullshit I just had to do closing. Over here, and again, the maths make sense. In my corporate sales job, I was probably closing for 25% of the time, if that. When I made the pivot into remote sales, I was closing for 80 to 90% of the time. So even if everything stayed the same, you're obviously going to make more here because you're putting more input here. It's like a striker. It's like you're now taking 20 penalties rather than only one penalty. It's a lot easier. It's easier for you to score. So all of that to say, Don't be hard on yourself and think it's your skill set, right? You need to always be thinking, how can I apply the existing skill set I have into a better market that will pay me a lot more? I promise you, because once you understand that, you don't need to start a business. You don't need to do this or climb the corporate ladder for 5, 10, 15 years and all that bullshit. You just have to use the skill you have in a better market that will pay you what you are worth. And if you're paid, little sums of money, that's because you're not good at sales. But most of you watching this are probably top performers, so making the pivot will make sense. And that is the truth people don't want you to know. It is not your skill set, because they want to keep you in the role. They want to keep you, working away in the little cog of the corporate sales business. It's down to the industry that you're selling in. I promise you, make this small change and watch your commissions 3 to 5x per month in the next 6 months. I promise you, I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.